Welcome to Total Retail Talks, your podcast channel for retail knowledge.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of Total Retail Talks. I'm Joe Keenan, the editor-in-chief of Total Retail, and I'm pleased to be joined on today's episode by Stephen Bailey, who is the Chief Marketing Officer of Fluevog. We're going to talk about that brand, a little bit about Stephen's career at Fluevog, and kind of all the unique product that brand is putting out into the market. So I'm really looking forward to the conversation, and thank you for joining me, Stephen.
Thanks, Joe. Happy to be here.
So I noted you're Chief Marketing Officer of Fluevog. I would love for you to kind of give a little bit of an overview of the brand for those that may not yet be familiar with the company.
Okay, I can't imagine anybody is not familiar with us, given that we're massive and the world's largest producer of Fluevogs globally. We are a 54-year-old company based here in Vancouver, Canada. We produce unique soles for unique soles. We're a medium-sized business and independent and still owned by John. We have 23 stores around North America and in Australia. We got into the e-commerce game very early and have had an e-commerce site probably around 1999, right when they were telling us that the two things that would never sell online were pets and shoes. We are incidentally getting into the pet game next year, just kidding. And another fun tip about us is that we fulfill all of our web orders from those 23 stores. So, years ago, we had a window that went into all the stores in a campaign that said making mistakes since 1970, and we put it in all the windows backwards. That kind of came out of a genuine discussion in a meeting where it's like, boy, a lot of these things that we do and the way that we do them are difficult. But I think that what we've learned over the years is that a lot of the ways we do things are familiar to us and the teams that have been here, but also the differences from how other organizations operate sometimes come into our benefit.
I think it gives a good kind of intro and a little bit more about the brand. I do find it interesting that you're fulfilling all of your web orders from your 23 store locations. With that in mind, what are those pretty big locations, I would imagine, to house the inventory? Tell us
Yeah,
a little
some of them are good. Sorry to cut you off. Some of them are a decent size. A lot of them have good inventory stock rooms in the back, of course. And anybody in retail, first of all, while we talk about retail, can I just say retail is really hard and work is really hard. And to anybody listening who is in retail, you have company in how difficult it is. It's a tough business to be in. That comes to mind just when you talk about inventory and obviously managing perfect levels of inventory and the turnover rates and all of those things is a very, very difficult thing to manage. So let's have friendship in our misery. That's a little dark, but anyway. So yeah, the inventory stock rooms are of a good size. I think that I mentioned that doing things differently is a benefit in some cases. I would say that during COVID, one of the things that helped us out that I know that some of our peers struggled with just in retail in general was that if you had one DC somewhere that was fulfilling web orders in the very beginning of COVID, and that particular state or province was very, very strict on closures, people were having to shut down their websites and their e-commerce functionality. For us, having all of that product spread out all over the world, it allowed us to kind of it was difficult, but trying to maneuver through that and be able to fulfill from different places. The other thing too is it gives us a real human touch from the actual people who are putting shoes on feet in the stores to be able to service those customers who are buying online. So they can actually, honestly, the personal service of the people who are closest with the shoes is hard to beat. We've often thought about how we would lose that if we did move more to a more traditional kind of DC setup.
You mentioned, and I'm not going to argue with you that retail is hard, right?
Yeah.
But it's been a part of your life for a while, right? You've been with Fluevog for 20 years now. So tell us a little bit about your background, what you enjoy about your role and kind of your work at Fluevog, considering, 20 years at one company. That's quite a run.
Yeah, I actually try not to think about it too much. I don't know why. I guess it's because it contributes to my fear of aging, which is rapid. But anyway, so let's not focus too much on that. But I think it I don't really have any regrets of being at one place for 20 years, which says a lot about the culture in the actual environment here. How have we changed over that time? I would say one of the things we've held on to in that time is that we've been able to maneuver very quickly when we want to do something or when we see an opportunity. The other thing that's changed a lot is the kind of facilitation of operations here has gotten so much better and so much smoother. Now, if somebody joined us a couple of years ago from somewhere else, that may not be the first thing that they think of, that, oh my gosh, this is so smooth. It went from being run very much as a kind of, have an idea and then try to fix it and push it together as best you can and then try to get it out there, to something that is in so many ways it's so much more organized than it used to be and structured. And the guys from Northern Tool and Equipment were talking about people who like to get things done and like to get in there and make things happen. We have a culture here that follows with that. And we do use suppliers and vendors for things that are not kind of in our wheelhouse of expertise, but we also like to understand all of the things we do. And I think that that probably even makes its way to the consumer, who we call Fluevoggers, where we want to be able to understand all of the moves that we make and all the things we do. So that's a tangential. Did I just invent a new word? I'm not sure, but that is a long-winded answer. I'm not sure if it answers your
Well, I think
question.
it provides some great insight, and going back to what we talked about right at the front, that thinking about culture, you mentioned that as a 20-year employee at Fluvog, there's obviously been turnover, and as you think about establishing and maintaining that culture that's been built, what do you look for as you think about your marketing team and how you try to instill and provide direction that aligns with the culture that's been built that you've really been a part of for so many years?
Yeah, I mean that's a hard question to answer, but the first thing that comes to my mind is part of what makes it so special here is the people that work here, but it's also the customers that are very dedicated and loyal to the brand. It's not an easy brand or an easy style of footwear to just jump into. There are lots of areas that could create friction and obstacles to be able to just kind of knee jerk into a Chuck Taylor or an Adidas Samba or something like that. The customers are very loyal. It turns out that the staff are very, very loyal. We call them Fluvogologists. We've got all this terminology that exists around here, kind of breaks down to relationships. And so the relationships with your teams, the relationships with other departments, the relationships with the customer, these things should be thought of in the same way that we think of relationships in our own lives. These are our lives. We are humans living lives, connecting with other humans, building communities. So I think, one thing in this industry that sometimes I think gets forgotten as we use buzzwords, which definitely have their place, of course. Every industry has its own kind of language, but oftentimes we look at customers and employees as these other types of beings or something. And in reality, what I've learned over my 20 years here is just to focus on that relationship with each individual and with groups of individuals. That would be the community, and then focusing on the culture and what you kind of want that culture to look like. It's not something that's out of a textbook, I don't think. I just think we are all human, and we all need to recognize that and recognize that those relationships are important. I think the benefit there is you get lots of loyalty, both internally and externally. It does take time, of course. Like, you have to have patience in that kind of nurturing process. And I don't want to get too sentimental about it, but it's you asked earlier, about 20 years is a long time and what keeps you there. And it really is the relationships with the people that I spend the most amount of time with here. It is the relationships with the customers who I know intimately because of the way that we function here at Fluvog. And the shoes don't hurt either. It's we make a fun product that is hard to replicate.
So one part of that community that you reference and you have a close relationship with, we talked a little bit about your individual employees and your team, but this is the customer. Let's talk about the Fluvog customer.
Sure.
Does that span age, the wide range of spectrum in terms of ages? Tell us a little bit more about, so our audience can kind of visualize I don't know if there's a core or target customer that you're going after at Fluvog.
Yeah, I really wish there was. And I remember the first time I heard the word psychographic, and then you couldn't get through a conversation with me without me spouting that off. One, it was long and it sounded impressive, but two, it was the first time that I'd kind of found something that answered that question because I think it's really hard to put your finger on, and I mean this will age me too. Going back to advertising and magazines, the types of magazines we advertised in didn't really have much of a thread that ran through them because we were advertising in Vespa magazines, in women's lib magazines, fashion magazines, in architecture and design magazines. We were just kind of dying for a Fluevogger magazine that would be able to do that. So when I say psychographic, I mean I would say our customer leans more liberal for sure, more artistic, at the risk of sounding snobby, I guess, more educated, but that educated, what I really mean by that is someone who has a yearning for knowledge, whether it's in theater or dance or science or math. There's just a kind of a lust for life there. And for a lot of those people, Fluvogs are such a part of who they are when they walk into a room. And we can't start telling stories about some of the things that we've been sent or the conversations we've had, but they are very, very moving about what these shoes mean to people. So anyway, so it's not a perfect, it doesn't fit in a perfect category, that's for sure, and that genuinely does make things a lot more difficult.
You kind of talk about that disparate customer base, and it's not uniform, and you've got people different ages, different genders. Thinking about that customer, how do you then, given that there's so much diversity within the customer base, build and also maintain a loyal, dedicated customer base? What are you doing to kind of get the customer to think about coming back again and again to Fluva? Because as we know, kind of that loyalty, particularly among younger shoppers, is kind of fleeting. So Fluvog really prides itself on having this dedicated customer base. Tell us a little bit about the work that has gone into establishing that.
Yeah, I think again, like patience really comes into play here. I mean, I am constantly repeating this idea of planting seeds. And these aren't seeds for my mother-in-law would kill me because I'm not going to reference the right flower, so I won't even try. But these are seeds for trees. These are planting seeds for long-term growth. So we are constantly working on that every day, right? Every bit of content that we put out, every interaction, every touch point is trying to kind of build that relationship with the customer. Now, that old saying of it takes 10 times longer or 10 times it's 10 times more expensive to get a new customer than an existing customer. I would argue at Fluvog it's probably 100 times longer. I've seen people come into the store and try on 15 pairs of shoes and spend an hour doing that and really enjoying the experience and leave without anything. And then I remember this one particular occasion I talked to our staff member and they were like, they just brush it away. This happens all the time. People try on a bunch of shoes. They need to think about it. They're going to come back, and it's no stress. But it's a long process there. So I think on the one hand, we're always trying to be conscious of the fact that magic ticket or that viral video that everybody is maybe looking for. But I think that expectation's got a little more realistic now. But those are really difficult to find, those moments. I think it's the consistency of character over time that really can help create that relationship and then build that loyalty. In the meantime, we do a ton of other things that I think other retailers don't do that lend itself to that. I think 15 years ago, we were the first footwear company to lean into kind of reselling of people's old product. Now it's everywhere, and there's brands and companies that can facilitate that for you. 15 years ago, we did it with a simple kind of forum layout on a section of our website where you could upload a picture of your gently loved Fluvogs and sell them to another customer. We don't take any money. We still don't from it. We just kind of facilitate it. But the beauty is those customers connect and there's been so many examples of those customers having relationships. There's a trust factor there that like, I mean, I kind of don't even want to say this out loud, but we get burned by this so rarely. There are so few people trying to scam other Fluvoggers there. It is really just this trusting group of people who are passionate about this footwear and about this culture. And so those are the kinds of things that when you talk about kind of building those relationships and building that loyalty, that stuff really goes a long way. I mean, that for us came out of, the knowledge that people had, dozens of pairs of Fluevogs, and some of them didn't work for them anymore, and some of them they weren't interested anymore, but there was nothing wrong with the shoe. And in a world that we live in now where, overconsumption and climate change is a real concern, we just felt an obligation to kind of free those Fluevogs back out into the world. And the outpouring of love for that program is just incredible. And the other thing that was a lovely surprise is that we had it right on our website. It wasn't right beside our product, but I mean, it was another section of the website. And over the 6 months that followed there, web sales continued to increase of our new product. So, the stuff that we didn't do it for is built in. So
Yeah.
it showcases that the product has longevity. It showcases that the styles in many cases are timeless. All of those things are great. And I'm sure some people sold their existing Fluevogs and bought new Fluevogs. But I can tell you wholeheartedly that is not why we did it. And I think sometimes trying to recognize those human elements and those relational elements that are instincts to all of us. And when we see them come up, to follow them and try and find a way to make them happen is the thing to do. But it's not always easy. And, in a corporate setting or in a capitalist setting, sometimes that's difficult. But over time, I truly believe that's what builds that loyalty. I mean, and the fact that we produce a huge season every spring and fall, and those products are brand new, they're in small quantities, and they're of high quality. And that means the prices are high. And that means that they take a ton of work to go into to make that happen. And I mean, that's not an easy way to do business, but it is something that fans can count on, is like this new collection that comes out that they can pick and choose from. And if they're quick, they won't sell out. I mean, I just think
Yeah.
all of these things come down to just following your instinct of relationships.
Yeah, I think that's a great example too of how being a good social citizen and thinking about the steward for, social good in the world can really have some bottom line business benefits too. That wasn't the intent when you started this program, but it was sort of those, oh, we realized that, hey, by doing this, we've created this community, we've managed to put these relationships in place, and now we've developed really this really strong loyal customer base that really comes back to Fluvog because they, one, can trust the brand, and they know that we are doing things for each other and for the, in this
Hmm.
case, for the environment. So I think it's a lot of, you've built up some equity there with your customers, I would think.
Yeah, and I think the other thing to note is it's not easy. It's not always profitable. And also you create expectations that are pretty high. And the the only counter to that is that the forgiveness level is much higher as well. So when you do make mistakes, people aren't on to the next one. I mean, it's handy that there aren't a thousand other competitors that make shoes that may be out of your comfort zone. But there's, like with all interactions and all relationships and communities, if you're connected to one and you feel benefited or and feel benefited from, I guess, then you have a lot of time for that. I mean, you don't cancel your best friend because they were late or they forgot to meet you for dinner, but you definitely don't follow up with that vendor who I don't know, mildly offended you, or you didn't like the sound of their voice or something, right? I mean, there's not enough investment there to just keep that going.
And there's the authenticity too, right? You've established and people have come to trust the brand. I do want to talk a little bit about the product because it is unique, it's innovative, and it's really something that you guys pride yourself at Fluevog. Tell us a little bit about the product itself, and then how your team within the marketing department is really collaborating to kind of tell the product story, get that awareness out there.
Yeah, I mean that keeps everybody busy, that's for sure. And I just can't even tell you how amazing it is to see such a small design team produce such an extensive season year after year. And I mean, going back to our customer base, there is a huge variety in our offering. So you've got very light sneakers that are, built for ease of use and kind of a sneaker style comfort. And then you've got heels, you've got everything here in all varieties of color, from easier to wear black to pink pony hair to, colors that traditionally might not make a lot of sense for non-fluvoggers, but make huge sense for fluvoggers. So that's a lot to work with. And going into the fundamentals and the structure of running a retail business that involves both in-store and online, that brings up a lot of challenges with how to lay out a store. So when you walk into a store and you see a knee-high a boot with 3-inch heels beside kind of a Chelsea boot that's great for everyday use, that can be pretty jarring if you're not familiar with the brand. So the layout of a physical store is difficult. Online, it is a lot of product photography and a lot of communication, because while in that store, if somebody does make it in the door, they can ask questions about this versus that. Online, you're not going to have that luxury, so somehow you need to present it in a way that makes some sort of sense to a first-time visitor, which, it's not always possible, and it takes the right person to visit as well. It's not for everybody. I mentioned earlier about over the 20 years that I've been here, those kind of structures and, I guess, let's say, communication channels have improved. Meanwhile, the staff at the head office has certainly increased. I would say in my 20 years, the company has quadrupled in size. So you can imagine that probably means that head office is roughly the same. Every organization anywhere struggles with communication. I mean, so do families of 3 and 4. So that's always going to happen. But we do have some of these systems in place that make it much easier now to really understand all of the design aspects behind each style and each colorway and all the materials that are involved. And so our teams, I will say, over certainly the last 7, 8 years, the marketing team and design team, I'm getting goosebumps now, but we work so well together. And yeah, there's bumps in the road, of course. You can really see the benefits of that, because the marketing team understand the product better. The design team understand that there's a certain amount of bandwidth for the customer to be able to learn about things. We focus on the same kind of mood boards going into a season, so it's really exciting. Honestly, I'm blown away by the quality of people that are on my team and that work at Fluvog in general. It really is a family, and sometimes, it takes a family to be able to pull those things off.
Yeah, and given this is a sort of, and you've alluded to this as a considered purchase. The level of collaboration between your design team and your marketing team, because you might need to be establishing and connecting, and there's multiple touch points with that potential customer before they actually buy a pair of the shoes, right? They might be in one of your stores, they might be, on your site, they might be getting an email, whatever the case may be. You're touching that person multiple times potentially before they're into and ultimately making a purchase.
Yeah, totally. And I think, of course, then mixing in the retail teams and the regional managers and all of that.
Yep.
I mean, it is difficult. It's communication is a really, really tough one. And especially, like, I would say that the culture of this company is that we move very quickly. So that doesn't lend itself to perfect communication. Now, whether you move quickly or slowly, if you exist in 2024 in retail, you're moving quicker than you did 20 years ago. That's for sure, if you're able to stay in business. So just in general, people are doing more things, they have more tasks that are more varied, and they have to move so fast just to keep the customer's engagement around things. Communication inevitably gets dropped there. I really feel like there needs to be an understanding in organizations that I don't know that perfect is attainable.
Mhm.
I think the doing the best you can and having these systems in place. And like I said, I can think of 3 or 4 that have really saved us in terms of communicating to the entire company about initiatives that are going out. But it still happens. Honestly, it's like if you need to jump on something because the numbers aren't what they need to be, or you need to cancel something because they are what they need to be. And then you need to communicate that to customers and staff in a rapid fashion. There's going to be bumps along the way.
Yeah. And being able to understand that and work with those, those bumps in the road. It's not always going to be a
I
smooth.
mean, yeah, and this goes back to like that forgiveness level as well internally. Like it's when times are stressful, that's difficult on everybody, but the understanding again in a kind of familial organization is that nobody is out here to make those bumps happen. And that can go a long way for forgiveness. And then as long as there is an acknowledgement of a miscommunication and an attempt to change it in the future, then that's really all you can ask for, I think.
So I want to, and with a couple minutes left, I want to know about kind of from your perspective, is there a particular marketing technology or trend that you're particularly bullish on for Fluevog, either currently or you see something that is potentially game changing for the brand going forward? Or, I have all these great, practitioners on the podcast, and I love to get their perspectives on things that are at kind of their infancy or still to come in terms of things that you potentially could capitalize on.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have anything very sexy for you, and I think we could go through the themes of the last 10 NRF conferences if we wanted to use any of those words, but I think more and more now, as AI increases, as capabilities increase, as digital increases, and as the expense of all those things increase, and the promises of all those tools increase. And don't get me wrong, we use a lot of them, but I find myself and my team reverting back to things that are more human. And so, doing a window campaign that is a little jarring to some, but it attracts the attention of all is something that a company our size needs to really consider and lean into. And, spending the extra time instead of fulfilling a web order to make sure it's the right size reduces your return rate from industry standard of 24% to ours, which is 7. And that takes a lot of weight off the teams and fluvogologists at every level, from both the e-commerce team to the store team, to have to take those back and reprocess them.
And a lot of
And
cost, right?
yeah, and it takes that attention and that humanness up top, right at the very beginning. So I mean, it's really hard for me to avoid that stuff, or like that realization that following that human instinct is the way to go. Again, it's not something you can buy in a box. It doesn't have a perfect API with your system, but I think it's important. And I think there's a lot of other places that will tell you the great promises that are coming up with AI plugins or with digital marketing and all of those things. And a lot of them are true and really beneficial. But the one that I think that doesn't get talked about enough is the benefit of that kind of human touch. I think also this is a bit of a stretch if you'll join me, but I think that we get so much knowledge from our partners, and we partner with Star Trek, we partner with doctors, we partner with like fashion designers, of course, with musicians, with kind of icons of industry. All of these partnerships that I'm listing now come with collaborative products. So if you love George Clinton, you can buy the latest George Clinton John Fluevog release. If you love Sandra Rhodes, if you love Olivia Jean, and then into the doctors, Dr. Bonnie Henry and Dr. Jen Gunter, like these people represent. I mean, that's a great way to go back to that idea of our varied customer base. Jen Gunter is a phenomenally popular gynecologist who, it says some pretty bold things that people are scared to say. And she has an incredible following, and she loves Fluevog, and we learned about her through that. Not to mention that a lot of staff were reading her books as well, and she has been such an enjoyable part of of working at Fluevog. And the reason I use that in your question about what could people think about moving forward in terms of marketing is that once again, we don't partner with her or with Star Trek or with George Clinton or with any of these people purely because we think they're going to move the needle for us, because there aren't many people partnering with, health officers, provincial health officers, because it's going to move the needle.
Right.
And many times it doesn't, but many times it really, really does. And so that's a really nice to have, but we partner with them because they are a match for who we are. And then over the years, we've found out that we learn so much from partnering with these teams of these people and these brands and these personas. And we back in October, we had something called Flamunity Fest, and Anna Sui was here, Xander Rhodes, Olivia Jean, cognitive neuroscientist who wanted to talk to the community about what Fluvogs actually are doing when you look at them, what's actually happening in your brain. A very popular speaker, and Tara Moss, an incredible author here, and best-selling author, multiple books, and working with them and their teams, with us and our teams, there's so much learning that happens from that. And I just you just almost can't put a price on the benefits that happen there. And again, like I said, sometimes it doesn't resonate with the audience in terms of the product. But again, going back to that authenticity that you talked about, I don't think any customers would question whether or not they were a match for Fluvog to partner with. And did they learn something? Did it make sense to them? All of these things would be checkboxes.
So you're getting that influence, but more importantly, you're getting kind of that market research. It's not necessarily traditional market research, but the knowledge sharing between you and your team, and then those other, the partners that you've worked with. It's a great example of that.
I mean, here's something funny that's kind of like, an insult to us, is that we probably don't capitalize on all of the ways we could capitalize on those relationships. One is, we're pressed for time and there's a lot of things moving, and those are special events that happen. But the other is, I think we're probably overwhelmed by the amount of benefit we get from the partnerships already, that the other things that we could probably tag on to that. So maybe we don't do an influencer campaign for this partnership because we didn't have time to, but it was not the most important thing about that partnership for us.
Yeah, it's not always about, to your point, there's probably more you could do to capitalize on bottom line opportunity with it,
Yeah.
but it's not the primary goal of what you've gone into the relationship with. So thinking about creating those relationships too is certainly important. As we close, Stephen, my final question. You've been very generous with your time, and I appreciate it. I really enjoyed the conversation. I'd love for our audience to get your advice. Any other retail marketers out there in the audience, as we think about wrapping up end of the holiday season, we mentioned as we close out the year, any insights or any advice you might want to share with the group?
Okay, well, I can't stress enough, which I already have, so I guess I can. But again, like following those human relational instincts that you have is very important. I think also more than ever, taking risks is very important. It's okay to upset some people if you're very confident that you're speaking to your crowd or your niche of people. And again, leaning into niches is so important. I mean, outside of the corporations out there that service absolutely everybody, which is probably not your biggest clients or listeners. I would say finding those niches, leaning into them, and taking risks. I want to also say, you mentioned holiday, and I know we're close to there. Just this last month, we did this for the second time. And it's finished now and sold out quite quickly. But we started something last year called the Holiday Box. This is around the theme of taking risks.
Yep.
So this was last year, we took this risk, and knowing that Fluvogs are difficult to buy for people during the holiday season, because you have to, first of all, shoes in general, they have to fit properly. And we use a lot of different last shapes. So a lot of the shoes fit differently, again, making mistakes since 1970. But there's that's difficult to buy your loved ones. There's the taste. Do they want a brown loafer, or do they want something with polka dots? And then there's the cost of making that mistake. Now, gift cards for people at Christmas, I think we can all agree it's not, there's not a huge wow factor there. It's not an overwhelming sense of love and adoration when you get a gift card. I mean, I feel bad for all the people who are I mean, I buy gift cards, so
Right.
I'm putting myself in
It's
a
not
thing.
the wow
But
factor though, right?
totally. So what we wanted to do was kind of find a better way to do that. So last year was the first time, and we took this risk of putting these boxes together, trying to educate the consumer in this small window in November where you could buy this box, give it to a loved one, and inside were three secret gifts that you couldn't buy from Fluvog. They were novel and unique and limited edition. We are never going to do them again. And inside was a magic card that allowed you to exchange that card for any pair on the site. Now, that's a risk because the variety of prices on our website is great. And if every single purchaser signs it, so you can imagine, I mean, I won't go into the details, but you can imagine that the price of that box has to be somewhere in the middle, right? To really attract a purchase. And so, of course, the biggest risk is everybody buys this box and they all buy that knee-high boot that is $1,000, right? For the discounted price of whatever they paid for the box. That was a huge risk. We're doing it again this year. It sold out very quickly both years. And the responses were overwhelming. A lot of people bought it for themselves, which we probably didn't anticipate. It was really meant for people to buy their loved ones because we felt like it just was too difficult to pick a price of the gift card as well. That was the other thing. So, you buy somebody a $250 gift card, well, that only gives you access to, 35% of the store stock that's in there. So this was a way to get around all of that. And, so far it's been a risk that's really paid off. It's not been a problem for us. It's not hurt us in the way that we are most fearful of. It was a ton of work to get off the ground, but I'm thrilled to say that we've now gone through our second year of doing it, and it was well received again. And it's kind of fun and unique, and it serves a purpose. So I think, in terms of what I would advise is leaning into your niches, taking those risks. And I have to once again also just talk about this book, Better, Simpler Strategy. If you Google that, it'll come up. But I actually find it probably one of the best strategy books I've ever read that really talks about value and this kind of balance of how to manage value to both your employees, your customers, while still maintaining a successful business.
Well, those are some great recommendations and tidbits that you share with the audience. I really appreciate that because I think it provides some actionable items for our audience to think about as they listen to the end of this episode. I want to thank Stephen Bailey again, who is the Chief Marketing Officer at Fluevog, for joining us on this episode. I really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you, Stephen.
Me too, Joe. And I just want to say you guys do such great work. So I really appreciate all the interviews that you're doing. They're really excellent.
Well, thank you. And it's guests like you that make the show. So thank you.
No worries. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. For more information on this podcast, please check out our podcast channel page at mytotalretail.com/podcasts for show notes. Total Retail Talks is available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and Spotify. Make sure to subscribe on our podcast channel page as well. If you've enjoyed this episode, please take a few moments to rate and review this podcast. Thanks, and until next time, this has been Total Retail Talks.